Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas, and if you've watched me for any length of time, you'll more than likely know that I am really into my JRPGs. I can't tell you what exactly got me into JRPGs, but I just know I've loved them for decades. And in recent years, I think they've become much more popular in the Western world, especially on consoles like the PlayStation 5. Xbox, maybe not quite as much, but things like Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 5, yeah, they're quite popular now. So in this video, I wanted to talk about 5 JRPGs which I think you should play in 2025, but I am limiting it to just one entry per franchise. If I didn't, we'd be here for hours talking about JRPGs, and I don't want to waste too much of your time or my time when I could be playing a JRPG. So without further ado, here are 5 JRPGs that I think you should play in 2025. First up is a game which I personally think is a fantastic game, and it is considered by pretty much everyone who is a fan of the franchise to be the best in the series, and that is Ys 8. The characters are relatable, weirdly enough, even in this amazing fantasy world, and you really get drawn into the story of these two right here. Now, if you are a fan of the Ys series, you'll know that's Adol and that's Dana, even though I think it really says Dana, but whatever. Overall, fantastic game to play. It really gets its value as well. It took me quite a while to complete this. The combat feels very nice. It feels fluid. The world is so colourful, bright, amazing. Like I say, the story, absolutely fantastic. You really can get lost and engrossed in this world. There are other Ys games, obviously, because this B says Ys 8, and obviously there's more after as well. But if you're going to play any of the Ys games, you fancy getting into the series, you fancy starting anywhere, I would start with Ys 8. It's a very good starting point to the Ys franchise. Next is a game which I think many of you probably would have expected to see on this, and it is really good. I would have included some of the other games, but having recently played this, I feel it really deserves its spot, and that is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So this is the second part of the remake trilogy, as you know. The first part was absolutely amazing, and then we got the newer version of it with the Yuffie DLC, and then this came out. This is fantastic. This is like, don't get me wrong, I love Final Fantasy. 8 is probably my favourite, followed by 9, maybe 12 as well. Final Fantasy 7, I loved it, but when I played Rebirth, I was absolutely blown away with its sheer size, its story. It's evolved from the original, and just how amazing it is. It's such a joy to play, and I can guarantee, even if you pay full price for this, you will certainly get your money's worth. So if you're thinking, well, realistically, do I have to play the original Final Fantasy VII Remake before you can get into that? Well, I say yes, maybe, but you could just jump straight into that and have the time of your life. Next up is a game from a series which is huge, and it's relatively unknown, I think, in the West. Obviously, it does have its fan base, but that is Atelier Sophie 2. Now, of all the Atelier games, I think this is the best. For me, it just felt the characters all clicked with each other. It works so well. And no, you don't necessarily have to play the first Atelier Sophie game to play this, and you don't have to play any of the other Atelier games to kind of understand what's going on. The general premise of it I find really cool. I'm not going to break any of the, I'm not going to reveal any story plots or anything like that, but the characters on the front are very relative to the game itself. It's bright, it's colourful, it's amazing. The story is not complicated, but as long as you're paying attention, you'll be okay with it. I absolutely adore the Atelier series, and although, there's some newer ones like Atelier Yumiya came out a couple of months ago, and you've got the Atelier Ryza games, which are very popular, I don't think any of them are as good as Sophie 2, which is why I've decided Sophie 2 belongs here. Next up is from another massive franchise, and the reason I picked this one is because I feel like this fits into more of a JRPG slot than any of the other games, and that is Yakuza Like a Dragon, or Yakuza 7, or Like a Dragon 7 in Japan. This, like I say, fits in more because it knows it wants to be more like a JRPG. It's turn-based combat, which means, it's different from all the others that came before it. But it also references like other JRPGs, things like Dragon Quest, for example. So it knows what it is. It's very self-aware, this game. It is absolutely amazing. It does drag on a little bit, which I think actually adds to the value of it being a JRPG, because you know what JRPGs are like. They can be quite long and complicated and twists and turns and all that. The characters in this are absolutely fantastic, and it is silly and goofy at times, so it doesn't take itself too seriously. The idea of playing as Ichiban as a new character in the Yakuza Like a Dragon series, I think really works well for it being more like a JRPG. The final one I want to talk about, yet again, is part of a larger series, and there are so many I could have picked with this one, but I wanted to go outside the box a little bit with this, and it is Tales of Berseria. The reason I picked this and not something like Symphonia or Vesperia is because I feel like this one gets left out in the dark a bit too much. It gets forgotten about, and this, I feel, is absolutely amazing. Velvet, the main character, I feel is a turn away from the standardization of Tales in general. And it's obviously bright, colourful, characters are amazing. You know, you come across characters like Magilu, who are just obviously very stereotypical JRPG characters. But then following the story of Velvet in its bright, colourful, amazing world will really, really have you gripped. It had certainly had me gripped anyway. So if you are going to play any of the Tales games, I would get hold of Tales of Berseria and then maybe go back and forth between a couple of the different Tales games. But overall, I do think that is one of the best JRPGs I have ever played. I know JRPGs aren't for everybody. I know some people would rather play a first-person shooter or some kind of tactic game or platformer or just Super Mario in general or Mario Kart. Maybe not Mario Kart World because it's very, very expensive, but who knows. Anyway, the idea of a JRPG has kind of evolved over time as well. If you look back at how the 90s were with JRPGs, they were all pretty much just turn-based. And the evolution of something like the Tales series and how that is much more fluid, it's not necessarily turn-based, I think that's really helped the JRPG world as a whole. And then you have things like, well, Yakuza in this case, where that ended up becoming turn-based as opposed to just, brawling, fighting, whatever. But that doesn't mean that they weren't JRPGs, because the rest of the Yakuza franchise technically is still a JRPG. In fact, something like The Legend of Zelda is technically a JRPG, because you could look at it as if to say, well, it's an RPG and it's made in Japan. But is it really JRPG? In my opinion, The Legend of Zelda aligns a little bit more with what a Western RPG is. But to me, in my heart, The Legend of Zelda, I think, is still a JRPG. But a lot of people who don't play JRPGs always have the image in their mind of 4 characters lining up, taking an attack one at a time. And that, that's, in all fairness to them, yeah, that's how it kind of was in the 90s, especially with Final Fantasy. You look at the first, 10 Final Fantasies, that's how they all were. They were all turn-based. And I think that is the image that people got stuck in their head of a JRPG. And like you've seen in this video, there are many, many other types of JRPGs with different ranges of battles and all that kind of stuff. But there is one staple that I do love about a JRPG: the stories. The stories tend to drag on and on and on and on and on. And then there's a twist at the end and it's someone who you didn't think it was. And, there's all that kind of stuff. And then you've got the standard JRPGs where, yeah, it's just a story from start to finish. A nice kind of contained story. But I do think the story usually plays a massive part in a JRPG, as would the world itself. A good example would be Atelier Sophie 2. There's the story to that is it's really kind of cool, but the world is what brings that game to life. The alchemy, it's just so beautiful. It's fantastic to play. And like I say, with some of these entries, you don't necessarily have to play the one previous to understand what's going on. And I think that is the benefit of, most JRPGs. They'll kind of introduce you to that world, even if it's the 7th game in the entire franchise. And then you've got like the Final Fantasy, where you don't need to play any of the Final Fantasies to play a Final Fantasy, because they're all kind of individual, unless you've got like 10 and 10-2. You may not quite understand how we've got to 10-2 if you haven't played 10, but that's a whole different story, because we didn't even talk about Final Fantasy 10 in this video. Anyway, please do let me know if you've played any of those JRPGs that we've seen. What do you think of them? Do you think they're good? Because I love them games. I absolutely love them games. But let me know in the comments any other JRPGs that you think people should play in 2025, because I know there's a lot. In fact, you'd probably even help me find some new JRPGs, because I'm always looking for a new one. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.